Hello, everyone out there in the land. I don't know what land are we talking about today, Brian. I have no idea. All I know is I am back from Alaska. I was up there for a while, back in the lower 48. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But you went to Canada. We are. It's been a minute since we've done a podcast, so kind of miss it, Brian. I missed you. I missed your bald head.
I missed you as well, Mike.
You gonna say my bald head? It's getting
Yeah,
there.
nah, I'm in no position.
Well, did you have a good time up there in Canada, you and Cheryl?
Mike, we had a great time in Canada. We flew into Calgary and hung out there a little bit, and went actually to an ordination service for a friend of Cheryl's. Guy named Keith, north of Calgary, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then we spent a couple days in Banff National Park in the Canadian Rockies. There, it's a
Wow, it's
lot
pretty.
like yeah, we and then we drove up to Jasper, which is a little less popular just because it's harder to get to, and that was really more our speed. But it was, yeah,
Gorgeous.
beautiful, beautiful country, beautiful country. So
Wow. Yeah, that looks gorgeous. Yeah, so I got to go to Alaska again.
news.
I'm on a 5-year grant up there at this Prince of Wales Island right off Ketchikan. And this time was special for two reasons. One, I got to go with my daughter. Riley, my oldest daughter, flew out and met me in Ketchikan. She got to fly on a float plane, and then she's there landing. And then we ended up doing some schools together. So she spoke to the little guys, and then I got to do the older kids. And, I'd already done a few schools before she got there, but she got to go to Heidelberg with me, which I was really wanting her to go to because it's a tough school, and we'll talk about that later too. But we it was a really good connection there, and it was interesting because she's a pastor's wife. She works in a church, and she had some interesting things to say, and we'll talk about that in a minute. It was really cool. I wanted her to meet Amy, who is a very good friend of mine up there. And that happened, and there was some good interaction with her. Also, we went up to Juneau and hung out up there for a couple of days. That was a blast, just doing a vacation thing, just her and I. Got to see some bears, some whales, and ate good food, and just a good time. So that was great. I had a really good time. The second reason why it was a meaningful trip was because that last year was where I was when I released the book Groomed. When I pressed send on that computer and made that thing go live, able to order books, it that's where I was. And also it was interesting because the apartment that I was in this time was also the apartment that I stayed in about 12 years ago, 11, 12 years ago when I was journaling. I wasn't writing a book. I was just journaling what had happened to me in the church and what had happened to me in Boston. I was just journaling, and I'll just full disclosure, I was drinking wine and writing. It was crazy. So I actually brought with me, I had it here, but the notebook that I had that I was writing in, and it was it was just kind of nostalgic being there in that room where I did a lot of the beginning of kind of venting what I was feeling about church. And so it's just a really weird week just to be there and know that, this was the anniversary of sending that book out. And so just to segue into what we wanted to talk about today, um, people have asked me, when I was up there, actually, I have friends up there, really good friends. And one of them asked me, Jody, she said, do you regret sending that book out? Do you regret writing the book and, publishing it? And I said, no. In fact, I'm very, very glad I did that. And she said, well, did it accomplish what you wanted it to accomplish? And yes, I mean, to be really honest with you, Brian, you and I have talked about this before, and I might have mentioned this in the podcast before, but my goal in that book was not to be the bestseller and send it out around the world and, for people to read it all over the planet. My goal for that book was to really, the people who were hurt by that regime, people that saw that stuff up close. I'm not even talking about the cheap seat people who got a glimpse, but I'm talking about the people who were inside the room like I was and were really disillusioned and confused about what they saw. I wanted them to read that book, and I wanted them to see, what I saw, and to help them process it the way I did, and to see the absolute, you know, evil in what we saw, because it was evil. It was evil. Because whenever you lie, if you live in a lie, if you lie and you live in a lie, that's evil. Jesus said, that Satan is the father of lies, right? And so when you lie, you align yourself. Even if it's a lie about God, if it's a lie about in the outcome of your lie has a good out, doesn't mean that that's still a lie. You're still aligning yourself with the father of lies. And that's what we saw. That's what we saw in Bellevue Christian Center, in Rockford First Assembly, and I can't go beyond that because those are the only two places I experienced the Mayos and Jeannie and Rick Lormer and all those guys. They live a lie, and in my opinion, and that that's what I wanted people to see. I saw it too. I saw it too, and I'm calling it out. And then she also asked me, did you get sued? She didn't put it like that, but basically, because that was a fear of mine. Not a fear, but
Yeah.
that was an expectation. Actually, it
Right.
wasn't a fear. It was more like bring it, but nobody did that. So I was able to tell her up to this point, there's been nothing legal that's come my way or your way. And so and it may come, and I kind of embrace it because I'm telling the truth. So if you want to come sue me with your lies, let's do it. Come on, you know.
Right.
And
Yeah.
but
So
it's not going to happen. So, anyways,
yeah,
yeah, that's
it's interesting, Mike, talking about the lie because this is just my perception. I'm not a psychologist, and I did not sleep in a Holiday Inn Express last night. But as I
I live in
reflect
those things.
back, as I reflect back on those times, the level of self deception I think is remarkable. I mean, there was this, I think, earnestly held belief that some of these people were, they were committed to a noble cause, and that they were specially, called and set apart to do this thing or that thing. Which, I mean, if you're Mother Teresa, feeding people on the streets in India, maybe that's the case. But when you're building a huge organization that's lining your pockets and you're lying to yourself about lying to other people and using them and manipulate them to further your cause, those are a web of deception and self-deception. There is, it's a lot of things. It's, as you said, it's evil, it's pathetic. It is, in some ways, on a good day, I can look and feel sorry for people who live inside that prison that they've constructed for themselves. But at the end of the day, that really is at the root. That selfish ambition and cognitive dissonance and self-deception was at the root of all of the things I think that you wrote about in your book, and we've talked about on this podcast. I just on as we're talking about the book, I want to thank you for the courage for writing that book. I know people who have read it, and it's been very impactful for them. It's done its job.
Well, that's exactly that makes me feel really good. And I would say 98% good, 2%, pushback, and I wouldn't even say bad. It was pushback, but there was nothing really in it that, there was a couple people that got a little upset. But okay. But 98% of the people and the testimonies, the people that I know were really lost. There's a few people that I was worried about, and they were really lost. They were lost in all that. They didn't understand it. And I think there's more clarity now, and that makes me really happy. It makes me happy. And it doesn't make me happy to expose these people. People, do you want to attack those people, Jeannie? And no, but I don't, they still live in that lie. So, if they came clean and said, you know what, we're out of the bubble now too. We see it, I would probably want to even protect them. But the fact that they're
Right,
still pushing that bullshit and
right,
lying to people and lining
right,
their pockets and denying, none of those people would talk to me. Nobody called me up and said, hey, I want to discuss your book. They don't have the courage because they know I'm telling the truth. So we see them in funerals, and we see them at gatherings, and what do? They stick their head, they put their eyes to the floor and look away because they know that they don't want to have that debate. They don't want it. If I was wrong, they would be chomping at the bit to have that debate, but they don't,
Yeah.
because they don't want
Yeah.
that. Truth
Yeah.
truth will win. It
Right.
always wins. It's gonna win in the end anyways. So
Yeah.
why not just tell the truth?
Right. You know, and I've seen some of those people as recently as this last week, Mike, and heard one of them speak. And I mean, I earnestly hope, you know, the best part of me earnestly hopes that those people can find their way out of that, because as I look at it from where I stand, that's a miserable existence. But the other side of the coin that people need to understand is that the influences of the systems they constructed and the actions that they carried out have persisted for decades. And there are people who still have hooks in them, right? And there are people who are still attached to that. And there are people who know that there's something not right about them or how they feel or whatever that has its roots in that experience. But they don't really have the words or the permission to say, you know what, that really wasn't right. That was really screwed up. And I
Yeah, the
think that,
permission
yeah,
is a key word. I like that
right.
word because they
Yeah.
need that.
And I think that's what your book did for people who were willing to read it with an open mind and an open heart and reflect on their own experience. I think that that gave them the permission to say, wow, you know what? As we've said so many times in this podcast, it wasn't me, it was them.
Yeah, right. Well, you mentioned that you went up to see an ordination, and when we talked about it, privately on the phone, you were like, that's the way it should be done. You really like those qualities about that situation that you liked. And we talk a lot about the bad, system, but there are people who are really trying to do it right. So can you kind of elaborate a little bit on what you saw out there?
Yeah, I mean, I am 100% transparent that I'm very cynical about the future of the church as it is.
Yeah,
What shocker, what it's
me too.
the way we've seen it anyway in our experience. And so we were in a little town called Lancome, and we went to this ordination. Cheryl's been in this online group with these people for quite some time, and her friend, his name was Keith, and three other people were ordained that day. But we went into this church, and I immediately just felt something different. I know that's kind of squishy to talk about feelings, but I just sensed that there was something different. There was a lot of diversity there. There was old people, young people. I know this will trigger some of you folks out there. There were straight people, there were gay people. There were all kinds of people there, and I did not feel as though anyone in there was unwelcome or a target or seen as anything other than a person, working through, their life and their shit, and all on a journey together. And um, it was a very accepting atmosphere, and right down to the songs that they sing and the way that they preached. It was about recognizing that, we are all looking for something real. And in terms of spirituality, we're looking for something that is real and something that is useful and something that is meaningful in our lives and something that helps us get through the day. They did a thing, and I'm not going to talk a lot about it because I'm going to screw it up. But, Canada's got its own history with the First Peoples in Canada and the white people coming and taking their land. And recently we may have seen things about some of the First Nation schools where they took kids and tried to re-educate them and all this kind of stuff. And they did this thing in the service where everyone acknowledged that, hey, you know what, this happened and it was wrong, and there's trauma and there's hurt and pain. And we want to find a way through love to heal that, whatever that means. It wasn't sort of a mea culpa. It wasn't, sort of a cultural appropriation thing. It was an earnest, like, man, this is tough, but we're living in it and we're going to find a way through it. And it was just remarkable. It's hard for me to put into words. I actually went to one of the women who was leading the ordination ceremony afterwards to thank her and told her that it really restored my faith that church can be something meaningful and useful, Mike. And it was, I mean, not ashamed to say, I mean, I broke down and cried while I was talking to her. It was that real to me. So yeah, that was a great experience. I did not expect that. I wanted to see some bears. I wasn't expecting to have a meaningful experience like that.
That's awesome. No, I think that's really it encourages me that I mean, of course, we know that there are churches out there that are trying to do the right thing, that are not counting people, that are not trying to manipulate and change them, but it's rare. And that's the sad thing is it's rare. Like when you talk about this, it's like finding a gem, because I've visited several churches in my since I left church leadership in 2004. I've moved around a little bit, Nashville, Denver, Monument, Colorado, Omaha again. Looked Probably visited 25, 30 churches, and they're all the same. I mean, it's just it felt like, Jesus in a box. And it just I just can't wrap my brain around doing that again. Even my church is different. It is different. And I don't go a lot, partly because I travel, but probably because I just don't, I just can't find and I have found that there. I mean, I'll be honest, probably not to the extent you saw that, but because it's still Jesus in a box. And I've told Jeff Baker, who is the lead pastor there, he loves me anyways. I mean, believe it or not, he still loves me, but I do talk that candid with him, like, "Hey, listen, I can't doing Jesus in a box is not my thing anymore, man. I can't I'd rather." So I had an experience up in Alaska that was amazing, and I'm glad my daughter got to see it. We went to Heidelberg, and it's a tough talk about native. It's the Haida nation, and I don't wanna go into all the different, up there, there's different native tribes. The Haida tribe is very important up there. When I went to Heidelberg, it's tough. There's a lot of tough kids there, and I've been there several times. Out of all the schools I do up there, it is the toughest. Like they give me the hardest time. They they're basically pretty rude most of the time. Because I've been up there like 7 or 8 times in the last couple of years, they now have a pretty good respect for me, and it's actually a place where I look forward to going. Well, there was a kid there this time, and Riley was with me, and she was in the back, and there was a high school kid sitting right in front of me, and I purposely went over to him and tried to, because I could tell this kid was going to give me some stuff. So I warmed him up a little bit and talked to him a bit, and he was pretty cool. Well, we got talking, and I just did my thing, and Riley watched it, and I just connected with this kid. I mean, and because the leadership there knows me, I go balls to the wall. I don't try to put on a presentation. I'm just talking, and I cuss and I get real because these kids' lives are unbelievable. They make me look like I grew up in the Brady Bunch. I mean, these kids have horrible, horrible existences. I mean, if I went into the details, and I don't want to because I said where I was at, but it's pretty, it's right. It really is. When you hear these stories, you're like, oh my God. I mean, it's horrible. And so this kid and his little group was sitting to my left, and we just hit it off. And he started asking me questions at the end about life and about how to dreams and how to make it and that kind of things. I had a Red Sox jersey on, and he liked it, and so I gave it to him, and so he ended up giving me this hat in exchange, and it wasn't an even exchange. But at I don't wanna toot my horn or blow my but that to me, like, yeah, I was cussing, right? But it was like I had to. Like, I had to get on that level with them because otherwise they wouldn't that kid wouldn't have heard me. And my daughter, who was a pastor's wife, you know, and she grew up in the church, but her eyes are open, and I really respect Riley's faith and the way they her and her husband both, manage their ministry. She said it. She said, "Dad, you just connected with that kid, and he was the right kid to connect with because when you hit him, they all were paying attention." And it was just she didn't say it like this, but it was an anointed time. I knew God was in that. I could feel it. And then when I did the junior high afterwards, kept apparently I didn't see him because I had my back to the door, but Riley said he kept walking by the door to look in to see if I was there or not. And finally at the end, when I finished it with the middle school kids, he came out, he came back into the room, and we ended up having another exchange. And then he walked me all the way to he literally followed me to the truck and that we were driving in and just wouldn't let me go. And then finally I pulled him aside and I just spoke. I spoke life to him, and I said, I know you've had a tough life, and here's what me too, and here's what I want you to do. And he was like all ears. And Riley was watching, and she started tearing up. And again, she said, Dad, that was ministry. That's what it's about. And
Yeah,
that, and I'm good.
and
I
to
felt
be
like I'm talking.
let me just interject here to be clear to everybody listening. This is not a church trip. I mean, this is just Mike being Mike doing your job, right? You weren't there to
Yeah,
preach the gospel in the
no,
way
I
that,
can't.
you know, yeah, right.
But I said something to
But you
Riley, and I've
were.
said this to people, right? Because love is the gospel.
Yeah,
Love is the gospel, and love
right.
knows its own address. So you don't have to say Jesus said. Jesus, you don't have to do that. I mean, you can't do it if you can, and if it's appropriate. But in that situation, it's not appropriate for me to go toting out my church and and blasting out my doctrine. My job at that point is this broken kid needs love. He probably has seen, on a percentage wise, very low percentage of what true love really is. So if I get a chance to give him a hoodie, big deal, and look him in the eyes and tell him that he's loved, that he's valued, that he matters. I mean, like the teacher said to us, well, his teacher said, nobody reaches that kid like you just did. Love reaches, love does that, and you don't need to give the address. Love knows its own address, and that's the gospel. That's what it's about, is giving love when it's appropriate,
So
and
what?
not with a hook, not with an angle,
Right,
not with, hey, you can join my youth group, or here I have a
right,
podcast, you can,
right.
it's 10.99 a month, and all that freaking bullshit, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Let it
You're not
let love do its own work. Love can work. Love knows how to work. Love knows what crevices to go down into a kid's heart. Love knows that. Love knows that. So
right,
let love do it.
right. And we don't need to sign them up for a program. We don't need to, you know,
Please
to get
don't.
them to go do this or to do that or to do the other thing. I mean, our job, our highest calling as human beings is to love one another. And then you just, as you said, you let it do its work.
Yeah.
Because when we get our fingers in
'Cause
it,
it
it
wa-
gets
it
corrupted
wants to
and
work.
it gets dirty, but
Yeah.
it does, right. If we're just available, amazing things can happen. That's a great story. That just really moves my heart.
And I got a hat.
You got a hat? Look at that.
Woo! This goes out. His name is George. George, I'm dedicating this podcast to you, buddy. If you ever see it, hopefully you won't see it because this is a little crazy. But, well, Brian, I missed you, man. I missed
I
you a
missed you
lot.
too. I missed you too. You know, as you were talking, and even as I was talking before, I was thinking about a story in the Bible where Jesus goes into this place and all these guys are there, and you know he brings a couple of women with him, which is like scandalous to begin with, and one of them comes in, and you know this is where she breaks the box on his feet, and they're criticizing her, and he defends her. But I was just thinking that as Christians or as followers of Jesus, whatever you want to call yourself. I mean, there's so many connotations around that word, but it's like you would like to think that you're a person or that if you're involved with a group, that you're in a place that anybody can come in there and it can be safe. You know, that George could walk in there and that George would feel safe and he would feel something authentic and he wouldn't feel the pressure to change or become something or any of that. All he would feel, all the Georges of the world would feel is like, wow, I've come into a place where I'm loved and I'm accepted and these people see me as who I am without judgment. And that's just such a, that's the thought that was running through my head as you were talking. And I think that's a really good metric for what we should strive for.
Yeah, just think if more churches did that. If that's what, I did have an encouraging conversation with Jeff Baker the other day. It was really good. Their youth pastor left, and so he was asking me questions about youth ministry and the model that he wants to go to, which I think is groundbreaking and I think it's great, is to not have a youth service, but to equip leaders to do exactly what I just did. To go out into the highways and the byways. Hello, that might be biblical. I think it is, and compel people to come in, not to the church, but to come into a place of love, right? To meet them where they're at and to show them that love does work, right? And I think that's exactly what needs to happen is and maybe do a celebration once a month type of thing. I don't know. But even in that, I just think the days of having some blowhard get up and talk for 45 minutes and tell Generation Z how to live their lives is really stupid now. I mean, it's foolish. And I think it goes across the board. I think churches in general in the next 10 years will go to a different model, hopefully. It really is equipping pastors should be equipping people to do the work of the ministry. What's the work of the ministry? It's to love people where they're at. And I think that's what we need to be doing. Churches need to be training centers and places where meeting felt needs, and then let the gospel do its own work. You don't need to preach a doctrine. And look at Jesus. He didn't do that. He didn't set up churches. He could have set up massive churches. That could have been his thing, right? Just going around the whole region and setting up churches and setting up leaders. He didn't do any of that. He just went out and reached people right where they're at, loved them, healed them, and that's what we should be doing. And I'm encouraged about that. I hope they follow through
Yeah.
and do that.
Yep. Yep. Well, good stuff.
Good stuff, Brian. All right. Well, man, people out there, give your comments, like us, all that mess. So we'll see you next week, and we'll be talking about what are we talking about next week, Brian? Fish. Hey, we got to
Fish.
see some bears when we were up there. Riley and I actually saw some bears while we were just driving down the road, and she goes, "Dad, that's a bear." And I pulled over, and there was two adult bears fighting, like play fighting, like playing
Right.
with each, and it was amazing. It was
Were
it
they
was
brown bears or black
so
bears?
no, they're black bears.
Black
Yeah,
bears, yeah.
no,
We
yeah.
uh, we had a similar experience. We were driving up to a construction site on this road called Icefields Parkway, and Cheryl said, "There's a bear!" Sure enough, right there in the ditch was this bear just kind of grazing along. So we stopped and took some video of it, and like it could have cared less that we were there.
I told this story before, but this is worth repeating. I got in trouble as a youth pastor one time because we brought this bear into a girls' cabin because the girls we kept warning them that there were bears while we were at this retreat center, and they didn't take it seriously, so they put hot dogs out to lure a bear in. We just happened to bring a bear costume with us, and I don't know why. One of the interns brought it, and we were going to do a skit or something, but it was sitting in somebody's trunk, so we pulled it out, put this kid in it, and there was no lights in the cabin. So this guy walks in as a bear, and it was crazy. I mean, there was girls that literally urinated their pants. I mean, it was puking. And I think one of the people that hate me about the book also hate me about the Hoynes. They hate me because their daughter was in there horrified. But anyways, too bad. Shouldn't
Well,
have put hot dog pieces out. Somebody should have spoke up, leaders. Anyways, all right. Hey, see
all
you guys
right.
next week.
Be safe out
Bye.
there. Bye.